The coronavirus running rampant in California's San Quentin Prison. Nearly 2,200 prisoners have tested positive. 19 people have died, 4 of them just over the weekend. NBC News correspondent Jacob Ward spoke to a former prisoner and the sister of an inmate with COVID-19.
They quarantined the prisoners that tested positive, and they quarantined them by putting them in the hold. You know, the place that they normally send prisoners that they are punishing for bad behavior. I'm worried because I know that because of the situation that he's in, I understand the prisons are limited in how they can quarantine other prisoners. It's a hard situation. So yeah, I want as much information as I can get from the prison. I want to make sure that they're doing everything within their power to make sure the prisoners that did test positive, they're getting the treatment or whatever they need.
There's no way to escape COVID-19 or the coronavirus in prison. Absolutely no way. If you look at the architectural designs of prisons, first of all, prisons are built with the architect of punishment in mind. So you have the smallest spaces packed with as many bodies as possible. You know, I lived in a building in San Quentin with about 800 people. 800 people shared 12 phones, pay phones. 800 people shared about 20 shower heads that are communal showers built maybe a foot apart.
Now that they have all of the COVID prisoners in the hold, is not a pretty situation from what he described. He described it basically as a living hell. No word from the prison system as to when he might be retested or what the protocol is for reintroducing them into the general population. Because you just can't keep them there indefinitely.
I was sentenced to 25-2 life in prison, which meant that I have up to 25 years to do, and then go before a parole board, and maybe or maybe not, they could or could not let me out. Essentially, from that moment on to my incarceration to death. But I was not sentenced to die of COVID.
I just have to wait and pray that, you know, when I do hear from him, he's still doing fine. You know, I don't want to get a call or a letter letting me know that, you know, something happened and he's taking a turn for the worse or something else happened. That's my worst fear, is the not knowing and not being able to readily get the information on how they're doing or what the next step is.
And Jake Ward joins me now from San Quentin Prison. Jake, let's talk about that solitary confinement situation. How frequently are inmates put in the hole, as they call it, when they test positive?
Well, Allison, it's not clear exactly the numbers or exactly what the procedure is that leads these prisoners to be placed into this kind of situation, but it certainly doesn't seem to have anything to do with their behavior or anything else that was going on. It is just the fact that they are coronavirus positive that puts them there. You know, something that has evidently driven the families so crazy, like Lisa Noel, who you heard from there, is just not knowing how long will they be there. What are the conditions there? What's going on? Lisa, in fact, described to us when we asked, you know, do you think he's able to socially distance while he's down there? She said, you know, one indication is that I can barely hear him when we speak by phone, and that's because of all the shouting in the background. So you can just imagine how packed that place must be. So an incredibly alarming situation for the people imprisoned inside and, of course, for the families.
Yeah, heartbreaking for everybody involved. Jake, I know you spoke to an inmate who says that the prison's layout is part of the problem here. Why is that, and what is the prison doing about that?
You know, this is a facility, it's you know, California's longest running, oldest facility. It housed, up to about a month ago, a little more than 4,000 inmates in the building behind me. Since that time, they have reduced that number by about 725. But there's still an incredible number of people in here, and there's just limited facilities. So the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation says that they have made several changes. In fact, let me read you a statement that that they gave us. They say, since the coronavirus pandemic hit our community, the department has worked tirelessly to implement measures to protect staff, the incarcerated population, and the community at large. And then they go on to say that some of the steps that they are going to take or have taken already. They have reduced the prison population by 725 people since March. They've installed air-conditioned tents with 164 patient capacity on the grounds. They've also converted both a furniture shop and a chapel to a treatment facility. And tens of thousands of pieces of PPE have been sent. They've issued cloth barrier masks, and they've done a one-time deep cleaning this past weekend, although Lisa says that her brother reports that cleaning was nowhere near as comprehensive as he would have liked. And so, you know, many steps being taken, but nothing like what experts have been recommending. I mean, we've talked to experts, and a memo was issued back in June by the UC Berkeley Department of Public Health that basically said you should be reducing the population of San Quentin by about 50%. So far, they've reduced it by only 18%, wow. And this epidemic is out of control.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it is. Jake Ward, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thanks, Allison.
Students back in the classroom today in Hendricks County, Indiana, which is just outside of Indianapolis. Even though 1,600 people in that area have tested positive for COVID-19 and more than 100 have died. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joining us now from Avon, Indiana. Ellison, what is the school district doing to keep students and staff safe given those coronavirus cases?
Hey, Allison, I mean, one of the key things that they say everyone will be doing when they walk on campus as teachers, as well as students and other staff members, is wearing a face mask. There are a few exceptions, but they say that will be something they will have everyone do and wear. There is a mask ordinance in this state. Anybody third grade and up is required to wear masks at all times. They have also rearranged furniture in classrooms, trying to make it possible for there to be more social distance. They say that they are doing a deep cleaning overnight, that teachers have supplies to do some cleaning periodically throughout the day as well. They say that they will have any student, when they arrive, go directly into the classroom so that they cannot congregate in the hallway, as well as encourage them throughout the day to wash their hands, to stay socially distanced. Water fountains, those can't be used just for drinking. They can only be used if a student has a water bottle they've brought to school with them on the bus. They're giving students assigned seats and having families sit together so they have limited interactions with other students. Today was the first day of in-person classes in this area. They are going back to 5 days a week for in-person schooling in Avon. And you can see behind me that this is the end of the first day. There's a long line of cars of parents here to pick up their students and take them home. We are at Avon High School, but there are a number of other schools in this corporation, Avon Community School Corporation, that have gone back today, and a number of parents that were either cautiously optimistic or a little bit apprehensive. Allison?
Yeah, Ellison, you listed all the precautions they're taking. It seems like they're trying their best, but what are you hearing from those parents, students about going back to school?
You know, we talked to one parent who was sending their kindergartner back to school, and they felt like the school district, the school corporation, had taken a number of steps to keep the students safe. And from what they'd seen, they felt like it was an okay situation to send their child into. That being said, we've spoken to even more teachers, parents, and students who felt the opposite. They say they are afraid to go back to school. We spoke to one family who actually made the decision to keep their two youngest grade school children at home, but they let their high schooler, who goes to this high school, Avon High School, they let him decide whether or not he wanted to do the in-person classes or do the e-learning option. But they say the problem is that e-learning in this area, they have a limited amount of courses that are offered. So that student who's an AP student trying to get ready for college applications and prepare for sort of his next steps after he leaves here, he's a junior now, he said that he had to come back to in-person schooling, not because he wanted to, not because he felt he was safe, but because he says in this area, in this school district, the e-learning options were not sufficient, and he couldn't take all of the classes that he wanted with e-learning. So he's decided for now to come back to school.
Ellison, I know you spoke to a science teacher who is against going back to school. What did she tell you? Why?
Yeah, she said that, she felt like there were other options that the school district could be looking at, that the school district could be taking. They gave students here, families, two different options. One was to come back to in-person schooling 5 days a week, same time as normal, starting today on July 29th. The other option was that e-learning option. She said, you know, there were better options that could have been taken. There are some schools nearby, school districts that made a last-minute decision to delay their plans to reopen. There are some that have decided to go solely to e-learning, and there are some that have decided to do a bit of a hybrid model where they have students come in person, 50% of the students 2 or 3 days a week, while the other half does e-learning, and then they rotate. She said that now is not the time for students to be coming into classrooms, and she doesn't think it's safe, especially when, in her view, there were other avenues that this school district could take. Listen here.
We have to go on with life as normal when it's safe. And when there's no alternatives, then I get that. But we have alternatives to doing this in a safe manner, and we're not doing it in a safe manner. I'm not living in fear. I'm using the science that I know and have been educated with to drive my decisions about sending my own kids back to school, about how to keep myself as safe as possible in that environment.
One of the things that teacher pointed out is that she's a science teacher. So while some classrooms are able to move their furniture, their desks to allow for some social distancing, she said in science classrooms, a lot of those tables are actually bolted down. So with an entire classroom of 20 plus children, she says that it's really not at all possible for people to be social distancing in her classroom. She also reminded us and pointed out that Avon Schools was actually some of the first to close in Indiana back in March. They closed after they had just 2 cases of COVID-19. They decided to send all of the kids home and keep the schools closed. Her question is, if 1 and 2 were too many cases for it to be safe for students, staff, and teachers, all of them to be back inside, why is it safe now when the pandemic and the numbers have only increased? Allison?
Yeah, pretty good questions there. Ellison Barber in Indiana, thank you so much. Clusters of COVID-19 are popping up across Europe, and now people there are worried about a possible second wave. NBC News global correspondent Carl Nessman reports.
Allison, good afternoon. Many people in Europe, from travelers to prime ministers, are asking themselves the same question. Is this the dreaded second wave of coronavirus? Around a dozen countries here seeing a surge in new cases. And although the numbers are not as high as they were during the first wave, this is high enough to start prompting some new lockdown measures in some areas and also reimposing some travel restrictions in countries as well. And of course, this is supposed to be the peak of travel season here in Europe. Now, the worst hit country is Spain, seeing a tripling in new cases over just the last 2 weeks. And over the weekend, we saw the UK government practically overnight reimposing its mandatory quarantine rules for travelers returning from Spain. That left scores of people sitting on the beach suddenly in limbo, realizing they would have to quarantine for 2 weeks when they returned home. Germany also putting some new travel restrictions on Spain. Now, in terms of what's actually causing this surge in cases, experts say it could be any of a number of factors. That increase in international travel we're seeing. Some cases it could be just people returning to work. And another factor could just be young people getting a little bit more relaxed with their social distancing measures. We spoke with one public health expert who pointed out the challenges that governments are now facing, and he says that countries really could learn from the way that they eased their lockdowns. Here's what he told us.
Many of us have been arguing from the very beginning that as countries move out of lockdown, they should do so gradually, do one thing at a time, and then wait to see what the consequences are. Unfortunately, a number of countries have rather rushed in and have done everything together, so we're not absolutely sure. We clearly need to have extremely well-functioning find, test, trace, isolate support systems.
So, Allison, is this a second wave? Well, the WHO now is saying that this really could all be part of one big wave, and that's all the more reason not to get complacent. Meanwhile, the European Union is preparing for another worry. The regular old flu season is just around the corner in the fall.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here. And click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.